What is going on, everybody, and welcome back into Barley Studios. Now, today in the studio, we're using MonsterClay to begin sculpting the Arctic snow owl. Now, this is going to be a very fun project, and I'm looking forward to getting this bad boy knocked out. Now, we're going to be mainly focusing on the actual facial cavity of the owl itself, and it does go through some processes until I'm just really happy with the overall feather structure. So just be aware, we're going to begin by using MonsterClay to kind of block in the face, and then I'll do another block in section throughout the process until I'm just really happy with the buildup of the clay and the feather structure on the face of the owl. So stay tuned to the end of the video, guys. We're also going to do a demonstration on how to smooth MonsterClay with solvents. So if you're looking for that type of content, it will be as a bonus feature in this episode. Let's get some MonsterClay out and let's have some fun. All right, everybody. So I'm not going to talk too much during this process, but I am going to give you like insights along the way, just as far as what I'm thinking, and how I'm feeling about the project as we go. Because I've never sculpted a owl before, this is completely new to me. At one point I had planned to sculpt like a small like baby barn owl or maybe like a spotted owl, and I got so busy that I just didn't have time to do it. So maybe I'll revisit that in the future. But of course, instead of like sculpting just a small owl, we're going to jump right into sculpting a massive snow owl. So of course, this is going to be my interpretation of the snow owl, but we're going to do our best to kind of honor the overall anatomy of the owl. We want it to be a little realistic. We want it to look very textured. We want it to be very ornate. Now, some of the details that along the way, I won't be able to really lock in, like the microscopic details of the tips of the feathers and the transition lines until I'm ready to go into the casting process and the mold making. Normally for these, because we were using MonsterClay, both medium and hard mixed together for these projects, once I get the overall texture put in, we'll come in with some latex, as well as probably make a fiberglass jacket of it so I can reproduce it in the future for other customers. Or even like my wife, she may showed interest in having one of these for the house. So I'll definitely have to revisit that in the future, maybe some other versions of this on different stands and things like that. So this is our very first time making the owl. So all of this is from scratch. This is just me out of the blue deciding, hey, I'm going to make an owl and I'm just going to do the best that I can. Because it is something that I haven't sculpted before, I do have to go through a few layers of blocking in and detail work until I'm really happy with the overall anatomy of the face. And it starts with the face. Now, as you can see in this diagram right here, we're going to begin kind of texturing some of the feathers. It's very important for owl faces that you understand how the feathers are circulating around the face. So a lot of times they come up and over the eye cavity, and they go in a spiral heart motion. Here is that diagram again, just one more time, and it just gives you a depiction with the arrows of the feather structure and how they're supposed to flow across the face. So it's very cool to be able to see that in just a diagram format. Now what we're going to use is we're going to use a dental carving tool to go ahead and give striations to the texture of the clay to get an idea of how those feathers need to flow throughout the face structure. Alright guys, so I've got the eyes kind of like locked in a little bit, and I'll shave those down over time to make them go further into the eye sockets of the owl. Now the owl plumage is going to be kind of like very fluffy around the eyes, so although the eyes would be really round and, you know, ocular for instance, because of the plumage of the feathers around the eyes, to protect those from like sleet and rain and wind and stuff, we want to make sure that the eyes aren't too large. It's just not that style of owl. Of course, if I wanted to make it like super, you know, wide-eyed and make the eyes really round, we could do that. But I want to make sure that we can simulate that plumage around the eyes is really kind of like surrounding the exterior of the eyes and making it feel like the eyes aren't really round or sticking out very far. So we want to make sure that they're kind of inset into the head a little bit. Now this is the very first blocking in layer, and right now I'm just using the dental tool to really see how, again, I want the feather striations and directions to go. This is one of the most important things to get mainly just a realistic type of look for the item, or for the owl, that is. And I need to make sure I can kind of get this kind of locked in here. I'm really not happy with the anatomy of the face at this point, but it will get there over time. So right now I'm just going to continue kind of marking in the directions of the feathers as our kind of diagram showed us earlier, and we're going to kind of just jump from clip to clip. I'm editing out when I'm just really sitting back, just looking at the item, deciding on what I would like to do differently. Over time, I do get it to where I'm really happy with the anatomy of the feather plumage on the face. And then once the feathers across the face are really locked into position, and I'm really happy with the overall just general textures, at that point I can start working around to the back of the head, as well as down to the breast and over to the tops of the wings there. So we're really going to blast through this portion here. I'm going to really just time skip a little bit. I believe this is in like, I don't know, like 16 times speed or so. So we're really just blasting through it. I'm going to add another layer of blocking in clay here. I just really felt like the face was very flat. And I'm not saying that there aren't owls that have just really rounded faces like that, but I just really wasn't happy with it. And I need to get it to where I'm happy with it as the artist, so that when moving forward into the other pieces of the plumage, then I'm really not just feeling like something's just off the entire time. I need to try to make sure that I get this kind of locked in, and then I can move on to the other portions of it. I decided to go ahead and blend in down the lower portions of the face feathers down towards the breast. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start sculpting out some of those eye cavities there. As I build up more clay around the eye sockets, it feels like the eyes go further in depth into the head. And a lot of times that's naturally how the real, characteristics of the owl are. Those eyes are really far back in the eye cavity or the eye socket. And the owl usually twists its head and not the eyes to look around. That's why owls can really turn their heads in such a wide degree. So again, using the same dental tool that we were using before, I'm going to go ahead and add those striations in a nice heart shape away from the eye cavity, bringing those down a little bit. Again, this is only so that I can kind of get a general idea of how I like the anatomy of the blocking in stages. I can always come back and give it a different texture of feathers later, and I do that. So although I'm using this right now just to get a general idea of my feather plumage shapes, this texture really won't survive this sculpting process in the long run, but it is integral to really understanding your sculpture. So there is a seam line between the lower beak and the lower chin of the feathers, as it were. So you want to make sure that you can kind of like distinguish that out and away from the lower portions of the face feathers. So I'm really just separating that mustache, as it were, around the beak area from those lower feathers, and I'm fluffing those out with additional clay. We're going to continue building up around the eye socket there, and then we'll carve out the eye socket again, making sure that that eye socket, although we're getting clay kind of settled into there by mushing it onto the item, that clay in the eyes makes it feel very deep. So we're going to go ahead and apply some of those dental tool striations again, and then here in a few moments we're going to get to another layer of clay. So sit back and enjoy the music, guys, as you just kind of watch me in time lapse, blocking in some of these details. Alright, so at this point you can really see I'm starting to get some of those textures locked in again around the eye. And it's such a big difference between the smooth monster clay and the detailed. So of course when you detail that out, it gives it like a really chalky look, and it activates the surface of the clay, and that waxiness goes away. Now one thing that I really just felt off about it was I felt like the face was too flat. In the upper left hand corner, I'm going to include a little image of the original diagram that I posted at the very beginning of the video. Now this is a side clip of that, the side corner, and as you can see, there is a distinguishing like separation between the upper portions of the beak and the lower skull, and we want to make sure that I can capture that. And I wasn't able to do that by my original sculpture or the original location of the beak, so I decided to go ahead and cut that with a bladed tool there, and I went ahead and pried that up and away from the face. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to block in some clay in there, so I'll push some more clay up into that cavity, And this is a very similar type of skill set that I used for the peregrine falcon when I was unhappy with the anatomy of the skull for the peregrine falcon. So we really just like kind of skinned the peregrine falcon clay away. I filled it in with hot liquid monster clay, and then I was able to detail it out without having to remove all of the details that I had sculpted into the face of the peregrine falcon. Very similar to this, but this is just a smaller scale of that. So I recommend you go back and check that out if you'd like to see some advanced sculpting techniques. Alright, so as you can see here, we really just don't have the buildup that I'm looking for. Now, I'm really wanting to build up the clay a little bit more. So what we're going to do is we're going to really wash out a lot of the overall textures that we applied so far. And I'm going to go ahead and apply a lot more clay to the actual surface of the face. It's going to really bulk it out a whole lot more. But as we get into the actual body sculpting, it's going to look really good and it's going to feel full. Think about it like as if this is the emperor of the Arctic snow owls. I want it to look regal and very finessed and very strong, and the body is going to be nice and smooth and elegant. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start taking some more clay, add it to the subject, and build up this even more. Alright, so this is the layer of layers, right? So of course I'll probably detail it again later as I go through the overall sculpting process for the entire body of the owl. But this is like the layer, right? So I'm really at the point now where I'm really happy with the overall shape. But what I want to do is I want to fluff that plumage out and give it a nice kind of like heart shape for the entire facial structure. I'm also going to blend out some of this and bulk out the lower portions. We're going to add a small beak in below the lower beak, and that's also partially because of the casting process. I want to make sure there's no void there to risk getting air pockets, and also I don't want to have to remove that later. I can always shave that down with the Dremel work process later on for detailing each individual one, but as you can see here, we're really blocking in a lot of clay around the face of the owl now. Now, as I stated before, we're going to be using a different type of tool here. We're going to be using a hooped angle tool here. Now, that we're going to take chunks out of the clay. Now, we'll do this throughout the whole body of the Arctic snow owl. What it will do is not only will allow us to have textures, but it will also allow us to reduce the amount of clay on the exterior of the project. So as you add clay on, you're removing clay, you're thinning it down a little bit more, taking some of that weight away. We don't want to use the previous dentals tool to texture the feathers for this one, because what we're going to do is we're going to smooth them to give a very elegant, smooth texture. And you can't do that with a dental carving tool. The solvents will just wash away all of the details that you've locked in, or it'll look really messy. With the larger wire tool, you're taking bigger chunks out of the clay, and in doing so, you're creating more texture to the item. And some of that, and a lot of that, will survive the solvent process of smoothing those feather textures. You can always come back and add more details if you want to, as you get to the point where you're like, hey, I want to add one here, smooth this out here, add a clump here, and then you can solve it out again. One thing you'll notice in the content videos, you'll notice the solvents really do take a lot of that moisture away from the clay, but as you reheat it, a lot of that waxy texture just comes right back again, so there's no stress with that. So again, guys, let's go ahead and get these chunks and the feather texture really blocked out across the face, as well as the cowl of the back of the head. And at that point, we'll go into the bonus material here for this episode, which is the solvents on the face and the feather structure. Now just remember that we went through the ugly phase in the very first portion of this content video. You have to go through an ugly phase with almost any type of artwork, unless it's just like truly like something very abstract, like an acrylic pour or a hydro dip, something that just, it gives you almost the final result really quickly in the creation process. But when you're doing something that takes a lot longer, like sometimes these sculptures take hours upon hours upon hours to create. So you're sitting here working on it for a very long time, and because of the length of that ugly phase feels extremely long. And as you can see at the very beginning of the video, you're like, wow, this guy is not very good at sculpting. And you may feel that way sometimes when you're sculpting something on your own or painting something. Don't let it discourage you. Keep working at it. Keep working and making it better. That's why we use MonsterClay also for a lot of these casted subjects, is because you can remove and add an unlimited amount of time to get happy with the way the art and the sculpture looks. Whereas if you use like a DOS air dry clay or like a Sculpey original, once you bake it or it dries air dry clay dries to air over a few hours, then it's locked in and you can't really change it. So using like a a malleable clay like MonsterClay to practice, even if you're not, creating content or selling your artwork, if you just want to practice sculpting in your living room while you're watching television on a small like TV stand platform, all you need to do is order the clay and a few tools and have a paper plate, and you can start sculpting right away. So don't ever be discouraged by the ugly phase. Everybody's art goes through ugly phases, and you should not let it discourage you from creating. All right, so we're really kind of adding a little bit of texture around the nose there. Well, I say nose, but the beak. So the upper beak normally has a little bit of feather cascading down over it. I'm going to make these exceptionally thick right now because I do think that I will probably Dremel them down to taste. It's easier to remove than it is to add after you've already casted an item. So I am going to make those a little bit thicker than normal. And if I want to thicken them out even more later in the detail work before casting, then I will do that. More so it's just about right now just applying very nice thick lines here, giving it a lot of texture here before we go into any kind of smoothing processes. Looking pretty good. As you can see, there's also a seam line of kind of an over feather effect between the kind of like the eye cavities and the top of the beak there. There's a little seam line of feathers there. It gave it more of a robust feather texture around the eyebrows. Not that owls have eyebrows, but if they did have eyebrows, then they would be very thick right now. So we very much built that out there and gave it a lot of plumage, and that's really giving a lot of detail and I would say not ornateness, but I would say a lot of regalness to the owl's face there. Now, of course, we are going to come in and add some more plumage and textures to the cowl of the head as well. So although we will round that out a little bit, we'll add a lot of texture to the back of the head as well, and it will make it feel more realistic when you're looking at it, as opposed to just seeing the face just detailed out. And you may see a little bit of that detail work in the glamour shots at the end of the content here in a few moments. But of course, like I said, I'll be working on that again here in the near future. All right, so I am going to thicken that out a little bit more on the bridge of the beak there. I said I probably would do that. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Like I said, I can Dremel that down at any point in time if I feel like it's too thick when I cast it, or if somebody orders it and they just don't want that, robust looking feather right there at the top of the beak, then I can shave that down a little bit. But like I said, I want to make sure that I get a good cascade of feathers down on top of the beak, and a lot of variations of the Arctic snow owls, or owls in general, do have a lot of that plumage coming down and on top of the bridge of the beak. That will also kind of keep me from having to make the beak nostril hole, because it's partially covered there. I might Dremel that in a little bit to taste as I make the casts, but I might not have to sculpt that into the actual MonsterClay this time. I'm really liking how it looks. At this point, like, I'm not thinking about it being ugly anymore. I'm really thinking about, like, wow, okay, what am I going to add as far as detail work next to make it feel like a whole piece of artwork instead of just one segment that's completed. Now, this content video is not necessarily about the entire sculpture in its entirety, but it is just more so about the face in itself, the blocking in process, the smoothing, adding more clay, and then detailing it with three different types of tools there. And of course, we're going to go over it with a solvent in a moment, as well as just bonus material. And you'll be able to enjoy that also. You can kind of see the little ruffles around the side of the head there. I'll kind of do that sporadically across the whole cowl of the head there, and that's where it kind of gives it a little bit of a realistic look as far as blending that in with the front of the face as well. So now we're going to use a little bit of solvent here, as promised, to smooth some of this out. Now, it's not integral. I could have gone without it, but it does make it look really good. So what we're using here is odorless mineral spirit. You can also use rubbing alcohol if you would like, and they do make some solvents that like Monster Maker Inc. also sell for their MonsterClay. but I am using odorless mineral spirit. Of course, use your safety protocols as you see fit. Make sure you have a well ventilated room when you're using this, because you do not want to breathe a lot of this in the long term. It just will make you sick. It'll hurt you. It'll hurt your lungs. So just don't do that. Same as when you're painting with oils. You need to, and you have your odorless mineral spirits out and some of those toxic paints out. Make sure you just have a well ventilated area there. So when I'm not using this in any way, it gets covered up. And usually if I do this, it is the last thing that I do in the studio before I leave to go to bed for the night. When I am in the indoor studio, that is. If I feel like it's too potent, then I will open the exterior window and turn on a fan as well, just to get extra ventilation. But again, usually I'll use this and then I'll vacate the area completely and close off the room so it can just, like, detox out the, like, barely cracked window or something like that. So just use your safety protocols. As you can see here, we're using a very thick bristled chip brush, and we're going to go ahead and go along with the striations that the feathers naturally follow, and it smoothed them out, and it's going to make it look very elegant. Very elegant, not super jagged. And we'll add a little bit of detail to the tips of the feathers later on in other content videos. Now, how awesome did this project turn out to be? I'm super excited for this. Now, of course, I'll probably come a long way here and there, and I'll detail it even more. So I'll kind of go ahead and sculpt the body, the wings, the tail feathers, and the breast of the bird, and I'll see if I want to detail it even more. If I'm sitting there in the studio and I'm like, hey, I want to detail that little area a little bit more, then we can always come back and detail it. So some of these portions will evolve over time, but this is just mainly blocking it in, getting those textures and the feather blocked in across the face, and getting a shape of the anatomy. Hope you enjoyed the content video, guys. I will see you in the next episode of this awesome project series. Later, guys.